When construction worker David paid for a stranger's coffee after her card was declined, he thought he'd never see her again. 3 weeks later, she walked into his son's school as a millionaire philanthropist, and his life was about to change forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. David Martinez was having the worst morning of his life when he walked into Sunrise Coffee. His 7-year-old son Jake had missed the school bus, his car wouldn't start, and he was already 2 hours late for his job at the construction site. To make matters worse, he had exactly $12 in his wallet and 3 days until payday. The coffee shop was packed with the usual morning rush. David stood in line, checking his phone for the 5th time, hoping his boss hadn't fired him yet. In front of him stood a woman with long auburn hair, wearing a simple black dress and clutching a worn leather bag like her life depended on it. When she reached the counter, she ordered a large coffee and a blueberry muffin. The young barista smiled and said, "That'll be $8.50. The woman opened her wallet and pulled out a credit card. She handed it to the barista, but after a moment the machine beeped with rejection. "I'm sorry, your card was declined," the barista said quietly. David watched as the woman's face flushed red. She tried another card from her wallet, but the same thing happened. Then another. Each rejection made her shoulders slump a little more. Maybe just the coffee?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Still declined," the barista said, looking uncomfortable. The woman stared at the counter, fighting back tears. Behind her, other customers were getting impatient, checking their watches and sighing loudly. David could see her hands shaking as she put her cards back in her wallet. Without thinking, David stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said to the barista. "I'll pay for her order." The woman turned around, her green eyes wide with surprise. "Oh no, you don't have to do that. I'm fine really." "It's just coffee," David said with a gentle smile. "We've all been there." But he could see it wasn't just coffee to her. The way she held herself, the expensive dress that had seen better days, the carefully applied makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Something told him she was fighting a bigger battle than a declined credit card. "Thank you," she whispered as David handed the barista a $10 bill. "I don't know how to repay you." "No need," David said. "Just pay it forward someday." The woman took her coffee and muffin, paused like she wanted to say something more, then quickly left the shop. David forgot about the encounter until 3 weeks later when Jake came running up to him after school, waving a paper in his hand. Dad, I got picked," Jake shouted, his face glowing with excitement. "Picked for what, buddy?" "The art scholarship. Remember I entered that contest? I won. I get free art classes for a whole year." David's heart swelled with pride. Jake had been passionate about drawing since he could hold a crayon, but art classes were a luxury they couldn't afford. David worked construction, and money was always tight since Jake's mom had left them 2 years ago. "That's amazing, Jake. Who's giving the scholarship?" Jake looked at the paper. The Harper Foundation. The lady said she'll come to school tomorrow to meet me." The next day, David took time off work to attend the meeting. He waited in the principal's office with Jake, expecting to meet some stuffy foundation representative. Instead, a familiar woman with auburn hair walked in, wearing the same black dress he remembered from the coffee shop. Her eyes met his, and he saw recognition flash across her face. "Mr. Martinez?" she said, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Harper from the Harper Foundation." David shook her hand, completely confused. We've met before. At Sunrise Coffee." Sarah smiled, but there was something sad in her expression. "Yes, we have. You were very kind to a stranger having a bad day." Jake looked between them, sensing something important was happening but not understanding what. The principal cleared his throat. "Miss Harper, shall we discuss Jake's scholarship?" For the next hour, Sarah explained that the Harper Foundation provided scholarships and grants to children who showed exceptional talent but came from families who couldn't afford extra opportunities. Jake would receive free art classes, supplies, and even mentorship from professional artists. "This is too much," David said when they were alone. "You don't owe me anything for buying you coffee." Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching Jake through the window as he played on the playground. "Can I tell you something, Mr. Martinez? That day at the coffee shop, it wasn't just that my cards were declined." David waited, sensing she needed to talk. "I had just left my lawyer's office," Sarah continued. "My husband had frozen all our accounts. He was trying to control me, make me come back to him. I had been staying in a cheap motel trying to figure out how to start over. That $8 was all I had left in the world." David felt his heart clench. "I had no idea." When you paid for my coffee, it wasn't about the money. It was about kindness. It was about someone treating me like I mattered when I felt completely worthless. You reminded me that there were still good people in the world. Sarah pulled a tissue from her purse, dabbing at her eyes. I called my sister that day, asked for help. She flew out from Chicago, helped me get back on my feet. My husband, well, let's just say his attempts to control me backfired when his illegal business dealings came to light during our divorce. So the foundation is mine, Sarah said. I inherited a considerable amount of money from my grandfather, money my ex-husband never knew about. When I finally escaped that marriage, I decided to use it to help people. To pay forward the kindness that was shown to me. David was stunned. But why Jake specifically? Sarah smiled. Because I've been watching, Mr. Martinez. I've been quietly keeping track of you and your son. I saw how hard you work, how much you love him, how you sacrifice for him. When I learned about his artistic talent and that he couldn't afford classes, well, it felt like fate. Jake came running back inside, his cheeks red from the cold. Dad. Miss Harper. I drew you a picture. He held up a sketch of the three of them standing together, all smiling. Sarah looked at the drawing and tears filled her eyes. Jake, this is beautiful. You really are talented. Ms. Harper, Jake said seriously, are you going to be my friend now? Sarah knelt down to his level. I would love to be your friend, Jake. Over the next few months, Sarah became a regular part of their lives. She attended Jake's art shows, brought him new supplies, and slowly, David found himself looking forward to her visits for reasons that had nothing to do with Jake's scholarship. One evening, after Jake had gone to bed, David and Sarah sat on his small porch drinking coffee. Can I ask you something? David said. That day at the coffee shop, why were you so dressed up if you were broke? Sarah laughed softly. It was my court outfit. I wanted to look strong and confident when I faced my husband's lawyers. Funny thing is, I felt completely powerless inside, but I thought if I looked the part, maybe I could fake it. You were braver than you knew, David said. No, Sarah replied. Brave was you stepping forward to help a stranger when you clearly didn't have much money yourself. I saw you counting bills in your wallet. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the neighborhood. Sarah, David said finally, I need to tell you something. She turned to face him, and he could see concern in her green eyes. I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. And I don't know if that's appropriate given the circumstances. Sarah was quiet for so long that David began to panic, thinking he had ruined everything. David, she said finally, I've been in love with you since the second time you visited Jake's art class. The second time? She smiled. The first time I was still too scared to trust my feelings. But the second time when I watched you encouraging not just Jake but all the other kids, when I saw how patient and kind you were, I knew you were nothing like my ex-husband. I knew you were someone I could trust with my heart. David reached for her hand. Are you sure? I don't have much to offer. I'm just a construction worker with a 7-year-old son and a mortgage I can barely afford. David Martinez, Sarah said firmly, you have the most generous heart I've ever known. You have integrity, kindness, and you're raising an amazing little boy. That's everything I want. Their first kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and hope. 6 months later, David proposed to Sarah in the same coffee shop where they first met. He had saved for weeks to buy a simple ring, and he was nervous as he got down on one knee next to the very spot where she had stood with her declined credit cards. Sarah, he said, his voice shaking, you saved my life and Jake's future. Will you let us spend the rest of our lives trying to make you as happy as you've made us? Sarah said yes through tears of joy, and the entire coffee shop erupted in applause. Even the barista who had witnessed their first encounter was crying. Jake, who had been hiding behind the counter with the ring box, came running out shouting, She said yes. She said yes. Now I get to have a mom again. Their wedding was small but perfect. They held it in the community center where Jake took his art classes, surrounded by friends, family, and some of the other scholarship kids Sarah had helped. Jake served as both ring bearer and best man, taking his duties very seriously. During his speech at the reception, David looked at his new wife and son. People say I'm a hero for helping Sarah that day in the coffee shop. But the real hero is the woman who took one act of kindness and turned it into a foundation that helps hundreds of kids. The woman who taught us that love multiplies when you share it. Sarah wiped away tears as she stood to respond. I used to think my worth was measured by what I owned or how I looked or whether someone else approved of me. But David and Jake taught me that real worth comes from how we treat each other. From choosing kindness even when we don't have much to give. She paused, looking out at all the faces in the room: construction workers, teachers, artists, kids who had received scholarships, people from all walks of life united by the belief that kindness matters. That $8 David spent on coffee became thousands of dollars in scholarships. But more than that, it became a family. It became hope. It became proof that sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes. 5 years later, the Harper Martinez Foundation had provided scholarships to over 500 children. David had gone back to school, becoming a certified teacher so he could work with at-risk youth. Sarah had expanded the foundation's reach, creating programs for single parents, domestic violence survivors, and children aging out of foster care. Jake, now 12, was a confident artist whose work had been displayed in galleries around the city. But more than his artistic success, he had become a compassionate young man who understood the power of helping others. One morning, they all returned to Sunrise Coffee for their anniversary breakfast. As they sat at their usual table, a young mother at the counter had her card declined while trying to buy milk and cereal for her children. Without hesitation, Jake stood up and walked to the counter. "Excuse me," he said to the barista, pulling out his allowance money. "I'll pay for her groceries." The woman tried to protest, but Jake shook his head. "My dad always says we should pay it forward. Besides, we've all been there." David and Sarah watched with tears in their eyes as their son demonstrated the very values they had tried to teach him. Later, as they walked home together, Sarah squeezed David's hand. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't helped me that day?" David thought about it. "I don't think I could have walked away. My mom always taught me to help when you can, even if it's small." "Your mom raised a good man," Sarah said. "She would have loved you," David replied. "She always said the best things in life come when you're not looking for them." Jake ran ahead of them, stopping to pet every dog they encountered, his sketchbook tucked under his arm as always. "He's going to change the world someday," Sarah said, watching their son. "He already has," David replied. "He changed ours." That evening, as they tucked Jake into bed, he looked up at them with the wisdom only children possess. "Dad, do you think that lady at the coffee shop today will remember what you did for her?" "Maybe," David said. "But even if she doesn't, what matters is that we helped. And maybe someday she'll help someone else," Jake added. "Exactly," Sarah said, kissing his forehead. "That's how kindness works. It spreads." As they turned off the lights, Jake called out one more time. "Mom? Dad? I'm glad your coffee card got declined that day." Sarah laughed, the sound full of joy and love. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Years later, when people asked David about the secret to their family's happiness, he always gave the same answer. "Sometimes the best things in life cost $8.50. But the real magic happens when you're willing to pay it forward." The coffee shop still displays a plaque near the counter that reads, "Kindness is always affordable. Pay it forward." And every morning, without fail, someone does exactly that. Because that's the thing about real love stories, they don't just change the people in them. They change everyone they touch, creating ripples of kindness that spread far beyond where they began. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those ripples come back to you in ways you never could have imagined, bringing with them the very thing you didn't even know you were looking for: home.